Yeah, without further ado, let's get started. I think we have a great presentation for you today, featuring two of my colleagues and today's speakers. Firstly, I'd like you to introduce. I'd like to introduce to you Huw Price, co-founder and chairman at Curiosity. Huw has
Hello.
Hey, Huw has often been described as the godfather of test data, although he hates it, but it is what it is. Huw, he's a serial test data inventor and has worked with some of the world's largest organizations to transform their test data management. We're also joined today by Lina Deatherage. She's a technical analyst at Curiosity. Lina works with some of the world's largest enterprises to embed quality test data throughout their software delivery lifecycle with the help of AI and modeling. And she's here today to showcase some of our AI-driven discovery and monitoring capabilities. So thank you both for joining me. And, before I pass it over to Huw, we do have this great poll going. And some of the answers that we had so far is that, our viewers frequently or almost always find that test data is incomplete or doesn't accurately represent production scenarios. Is that something that you've seen with companies you work with, Huw?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And Lina, is, when you're talking to customers about our tool, our platform, is test data one of the biggest challenges that they face?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really common challenge where you focus so much on building your test cases that you kind of forget about the test data. Sort of like having a car but not having any engine in it. You can't really take it anywhere. So I find it's really common to have a whole test suite built out and then you're just waiting to have your test data given to you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, please continue to fill out the poll as people join. But I think now we'll hand over to Huw, who's going to talk a little bit about Curiosity and, our vision and what we're going to present today.
Okie doke. Okay, so how to gain complete visibility of your test data. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this slide. Just make sure that the text's working, which is AI-powered end-to-end complete test data management platform. So I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about AI first, because it's everyone's, jumping around all over the place. And there's sort of, I guess, a few different areas where AI just makes life, it is transformative. It's absolutely transformative. There's no doubt about that. Now, there's a few things that we kind of, we do a lot of work with AI, obviously, and we've probably the last 6 months, we've been putting tons and tons of stuff kind of as accelerators and all sorts of interesting things within our tool set, our ETD platform, and Alina's going to show you kind of a few of them. Now, the first thing is that, I mean, the problem is technical debt in companies, and also people don't really kind of keep up with documentation and et cetera, and AI is absolutely brilliant at this, because what you can do is just mine your numerous sources. You could have requirement stocks in Jira. You could have Git check-ins, etc., with some comments, etc., where you've checked in some new tables and bits and bobs like that, and all of that can help you kind of auto document and keep your sort of metadata understanding of all of the test data and data. This applies to kind of real data and could be used by your BAs and business intelligence folk as well. So there's that one, which is just incredibly useful. And the reality is that I guess the core concept with test data is you want, it is a specialist practice, and a lot of people seem to think, I'll just leave it up to developers and testers. It doesn't really work. You do need either a center of some kind of center of best practice or a central team. That team does not need to be very big. You can have a very small team servicing 10, 20 projects. Now, the only way that really does work is if you've got very good communication between the teams, and you've also got the AI sitting there helping them a lot with little workers going and saying, oh, we found some new tables, we're going to auto document them. Is this good? Fabulous, brilliant. So that's fine. So I think that's just a massive helper, and for the business, that's enormous. The other one is actually, if you think about technical debt, the problem is people may have some descriptions of what the data is supposed to do, but over time that data has evolved and you end up with all sorts of different tangles of data with historical data in there, and people said, oh, well, just apply AI to data and everything will be fine. But the trouble is, it is a complete and utter mess, and without the combination of metadata and AI and human interaction, you can't really unpick all the strands to be able to effectively use it for AI ongoing. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is actually using our scanners in conjunction with AI, in conjunction with a pipeline, to try and but to be able to unleash the value in all the data, because you've probably got some in the region, either minimum 500 systems up to 3,000 or 4,000 systems, and trying to get all that data, I think, is pretty hardcore. The other one we're doing a fair amount of at the moment is actually training AI engines, because the problem is AI, it's a statistical tool, and if you don't have the data for it to actually feed on, you're not really going to have much. And especially for trying to put new features and new patterns, that's really where kind of we come into our own, because we can use the combination of modeling and also your existing data to build out those variations to train your AI. So there's sort of three different areas. We've sort of broken it down into kind of discover, act, and monitor. And what we're trying to do is kind of give people a sort of framework. Lina's going to, during the demo, kind of talk a little about how, first of all, we tend to gather things up, just kind of like find out what you've got, bring it under control. Then act is basically this concept of, I need to do stuff to my data. I need to build up greater coverage. I need to generate data which matches between two integration tests. I need to mask some data. I need to pull out bug data from production and recreate it in my development environments. Those are all acts. And then monitoring really is this idea of using the AI pretty much to be able to go off and just keep an eye on things. If things change, we've got agents which will just notify people. And this helps a lot with communication and people not falling, communication is, someone's come up with a new version of the API, brilliant, that's fine. The trouble is all the 4 other teams that are actually using it, suddenly all their tests fall over because they haven't been notified that anything's happening. That's boring and tedious. So let's use technology and AI and agents to do that. So I've talked a little about AI adoption. I think the growing data complexity is just sort of endless. The complexity is certainly with new technologies that are flying in all the time. I mean, we've probably got connectors into 200 to 300 pieces of technology, and they're adding all the time. Compliance and risk mitigation, unfortunately, there is still just an absolute slew of live data in your development environments, and you might have done a bit of basic masking, but you still have all the data patterns, you still have all the pseudo keys within there. Quality assurance, I guess what we're really kind of all about is kind of doing shifting left. Certainly AI helps with that. And that's really trying to build out the models, the variations, to make sure that the developers start with a lot richer sets of data. When you're moving into QA, you've got all the different variations of data and all the integration points, and we've created virtual endpoints and virtual databases to support that. And all of that shunts everything up front, which basically improves quality earlier. And then, tighten budgets. I think everyone is at the moment just looking for ways to cut cost. And I would say, I'm obviously biased, but 2 to 3 good test data engineers with AI looking around with a well-configured LLM, and you are going to get some serious improvements in release cadence and the reduction of bugs. Certainly no bugs sort of getting very close to production. Moving on. So a lot of the stuff we do, sorry, I'm just making sure you should say, oops, sorry, there we go. Uncover your data landscape. So this is this basically idea of kind of mining as much information. We've got tons and tons of scanners, and I think I've moved into your slides now, Lina, actually. So do you want to start picking them up and pile on into?
Sure.
Yeah, off you go. I will stop presenting.
No problem. Let me go ahead and start in that case.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Coming through.
Fantastic. So yeah, we'll go over a couple of slides before we jump over to the demo here. So we'll be using that Discover, Act, and Monitor framework that Huw introduced. to really dive deep into each of the stages. And primarily, we're going to focus on the discover as well as the monitor end. And essentially, those two are going to loop back continuously to provide updated feedback and to essentially continuously do discovery. So discovery is really all about connecting, automating, and learning in this one-time process, while monitoring is reiterating through that process. As part of the discovery, we're going to connect to all of your different data sources, bring them inside of the platform, and via our AI data insights, we're going to automatically review and highlight some insights on a dashboard. And as part of that, we're also going to talk a bit about compliance and quality and how you can monitor that, as well as all of the different AI features we have to scan your database and provide helpful information. So the other side of that coin is monitoring, which is staying ahead of change. So this is where we start to be really proactive. So those data insights that we set up during the discovery phase, we can actually continuously do those either on a schedule or ad hoc. So you're constantly having your data monitored, so you have enhanced visibility and understanding. And because you're able to understand your data systems more, you're also able to enforce policies better and standardize. As well as just receiving alerts in the platform, you can also receive alerts via email, so you can immediately notify key stakeholders of potential violations or database schema changes and catch that up front. And lastly, once again, we have those AI-driven insights. It's going to be continuously run on our chosen schedule. So with that, let's go ahead and just jump into the software here. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, so hopefully that's coming through.
Yeah.
And perfect, thank you, Mantis. So today I'll walk you through how we'll be using Enterprise Test Data's platform to bring the Discover, Act, and Monitor framework to life. So we'll start by talking a little bit about what Enterprise Test Data, or what ETD is. And you can think of ETD as your central command center for all your test data activities, because chances are your organization already has various tools or has homegrown custom solutions for some parts of test data management, such as data generation. But what ETD allows you to do is to bring those existing assets together in a central location, as well as create any new assets for a test data activity you need. And as part of that, we're going to standardize all of these activities to make them reusable and discoverable across all of your teams. And really at the core of this is our self-service data portal. And this will function as your test data mart, where anyone can request, generate, or manage the data they need exactly when they need it. So all of these utilities inside of the portal can be triggered via a form. So we'll pull up an example underneath our data generation here. So here is a completely custom built form, and this can be exposed via an iframe and embedded in something like a Confluence page, so anyone can access it without logging into the portal itself. Or we can also invoke this as part of an API call. So this might be something as part of a CI/CD pipeline, which is really going to further help to standardize that process. And the benefits of having a central command center is that we can now firstly track your data requests, so we know exactly what kind of data is being requested. And we can monitor job failures as well as understand trends in data usage, which will feed directly into our ability to optimize over time. So with that brief introduction of the Enterprise Test Data platform, we'll go straight into the discovery phase now. So the first step in our framework is discover, which is all about understanding what data assets exist in your estate, where they are, and how they relate to one another. And once we understand what currently exists, we can bring it under control by developing structure around these individual assets. And most organizations lack a central repository of their data structures. But with ETD, we solve this via our data dictionary. And here we've connected up to all of our databases and scanned them, as well as our messages, APIs, and payloads. And we're bringing that into this centralized data dictionary. During the scanning, we're also collecting all of the metadata about our data connections. So we're capturing both the foreign keys as well as something that we call soft keys, which represent internal business relationships that aren't enforced at a data level, but are very important to the application or at the UI level when we're doing testing. So inside of our data dictionary here, the first thing that we'll need to do is establish our database connection. And establishing a connection is really quick and seamless. We just click through our wizard here to connect through our profile. And once we've connected, we can automatically scan and pull in that metadata. So we'll pull up this example here for a bank called Acme Bank, and we'll be using this throughout today's demo. And one of the major benefits here is our automated data insight tasks. So these tasks here run on your chosen schedule and provide consistent, actionable intelligence about your data. So each one of these tasks is going to run a set of predefined actions and deliver results directly to your inbox. So you're essentially always informed without needing to manually check. I'll just point out a few of the ones here that we'll see later. So the first in this series, what triggers all of the rest of the actions is the scan database action. After there, we're going to populate all of the columns and tables with metadata that's done via the AI. And we're also going to scan for any personal identifiable information, as well as a couple of other interesting metrics, and finally summarize that inside of an email. And we'll come back to this and see the results of it as part of our dashboard. But this level of automation and proactive insight enables teams to spend less time managing data and more time driving business outcomes. And every scan of your database is going to create a definition. So we'll switch over to the next tab here. And you can think of a definition as a detailed snapshot of your data landscape at a specific moment in time. So this serves as dynamic living documentation that alerts you to structural changes or anomalies, and it really helps to let you stay ahead of those issues before they affect downstream systems or users. So here we have a definition of our Acme Bank, and there's quite a few things we can do at this stage. So over here, in our description, and I'll just open up one of the tables as well. You'll notice that all of the descriptions are describing what the column or table contains, and this was all done via the AI. So we call this the AI-powered definition, and this is what Huw was referring to when we're mining our internal and external sources to auto-document your structures. So a use case for this might be something where the database itself isn't very descriptive with the column names or the table names. A classic example of that is SAP. And we will go through and the tool will automatically gather the information to make it human readable and actually informative. And as part of our scan, we also did that AI PII scan. So you'll notice here that we have tags saying what kind of PII it contains, and as well as whether or not it has any PII in the first place. So this is continuously monitored, and anytime there's a new column that contains PII, it will be labeled so we can think about either masking or creating synthetic data generation for it. And lastly, all of this is completely auto-monitored. So when really any of the structures change or whenever new PII is found, this documentation is automatically updated and reflected in our dashboard. The one other thing I'd like to just show in the definition screen is our relationship diagram builder. So this allows us to create different diagrams on the spot to really understand what our data relationships are. So I just want to show you two examples. The first being an entity relationship diagram. So here we could really quickly see the parent and child relationships of our database connection. And my personal favorite is the radial partition diagram. So this allows you to visualize the table dependencies and understand the ripple effects of changes. So for example, the customers table is related to all of these other tables here. And I can switch the context. And this is something that I'll want to keep in mind when we move to the next phase, which is acting on this to create data. All right. And the last step of our discovery is our discovery dashboard. So this dashboard is going to represent key insights through a series of dynamic cards. And each one of these cards is designed to give you fast, actionable visibility into your data ecosystem. So we'll go through a couple of the highlights here for today. So I just want to draw your attention to the relationship card here. So this is going to allow you to assess the depth of your schema by viewing both enforced foreign keys and those soft keys. So that's the business implied relationships. So this hybrid visibility is going to bridge the gap between the actual technical structure and the business logic. And over on the left-hand side, we have our data compliance. So this card will reveal how much sensitive data you have and what kind of sensitive data it is as well. Its ratio to non-sensitive data, and also how much of your data remains unclassified. So this would really highlight the areas that might pose some regulatory risk. And lastly, we have our data validation. So this is going to ensure that your data integrity is in line with rule-based checks. So we're able to instantly identify any invalid soft links, missing or corrupt values, or foreign key inconsistencies and report them on here. And we'll be coming back to this dashboard in the monitor stage. So we'll go ahead and tuck it away in our back pocket for now. But that is the first stage of the platform, which is discovery. And with that, we'll now move on to the second stage, which is the act phase. And this phase is really all about provisioning the right data at the right time for your developers and testers. So data activities at this stage can be executed either as standalone activities or orchestrated in pipelines, depending on the complexity and scale of the need. So today we'll be going over 3 different pipeline examples. And this first one here is a pipeline that will clean and create a development environment, so a testing environment. So I'll just zoom in here on our canvas, and you'll see that each one of these activities are being chained together. And this pipeline, so it's going to create a clean development environment out of an existing environment. So if we open up our submission form here, we can see the parameters for each one of our activities. So for example, for our comparison activity, we have all of these parameters that we can select. So perhaps we want to clone customers. And cloning is quite interesting because it's going to allow us to take a copy of an interesting user. So perhaps the data of someone who broke production. And we're going to create a lot of copies of it to use for our testing. So all of the internal keys are going to be changed, but we have 50 copies of that customer to use however we would like in testing. And once we decide whether or not we're going to clone customers, we're then going to mask the data as well as subset it. And the result is a completely clean development environment. So once we're happy with the parameters we've set, we can go ahead and execute our activity here. So we can see each one of the steps executing. And just in the interest of time, I did pre-generate our results. So at the job details screen, we can see the run results of all of each individual component in the pipeline, with the final result being a data generation summary as well as a comparison. So all of the reports are available via a zip folder to download, and I'll just quickly show what a comparison report looks like. So here inside of our comparison report, we could see all of our tables as well as whether they were deleted, inserted into, or modified in some way. And we can also start to see the customers that we added, as well as the employees we modified with their pre and post values. So this is where we can start to really understand and gather some insights as well. So that's our first example where it's a bit relatively simple. And the next pipeline we're going to look at is a bit more complex and customized. So for this pipeline, we're going to be using a dynamic submission form. So in this example, we can create different types of data through 3 different methods, all inside of one pipeline. And the first method is going to be our kind of standard scenario where we want to create data in a given environment. And we also want to enable the tester developer to create the data themselves. So inside of our submission form here, we're just going to choose our dynamic submit form. And here we've specified the parameters as well as the values that they can take. So this is going to allow for some degree of freedom and flexibility that the user can choose from, but we're still providing the options that they should be able to. So maintaining some of that data integrity there. So for example, I can choose the credit limit, that could be whatever I would like, but the order status has to be one of the pre-existing values. And from here, we would just fill out the form and click OK and generate our data. So we can easily and quickly just create 100 records, for example. But we can do more sophisticated things than just the scenario-based method. So if we bring back up our submission form, the second method that we can use is what we would call complex data. So we'll change our mode to complex data up here. And this method is going to create pairwise set of combinations of data for the different payments, the credits, orders, and statuses. So if we scroll down here, we have our new complex data section, and we can specify that we do want pairwise combinations. And what this is really going to do is increase our data coverage by generating more combinations of data than we would have in that first example of scenario data. And if we really want to take it a step further, the last method would be to actually model the data itself. So switching over to a submodel here, this is an example where we're actually modeling out the data itself. So in the last method, we modeled out the variations of data that we're interested in, but we're also going to use algorithms this time to generate those different combinations of data. So here I have all of our individual data points that we're interested in, such as statuses, as well as all of the values that can take. And then I've generated combinations. So in this case, I have a total of 16 possible combinations of data that I can then create synthetically. So this is really starting to help us visualize our data journey. So what sort of variations need to exist for each parameter, for example. And the end result is this will enable us to create a much richer set of data. So I do just want to show an example of what the synthetic data looks like when it's generated. So this would go straight into our database as well, but we do have an audit report that we can download in our job details folder. So here we have our customers table as well as all of the names, addresses, and websites that we synthetically generated. So this is instantaneously available for your testers to use. All right, and then we'll move on to our last example of a pipeline, which is a really common pipeline that we help with our clients. So this is called a find and make. So in this last example, we're essentially looking for specific kind of data in a already existing database. And once we find that data, we're going to allocate that data to you for a certain number of days. So the vast majority of people actually spend most of their time looking for data rather than creating it or testing with it. So this will really help to unblock you with that. So we're using an activity to automate that process. And then we've also chained it to another activity, which is going to allow us to synthetically create data if it doesn't exist. So here inside of our form, we could specify what kind of user we're trying to make. So perhaps I want a credit limit of 2,000, and we can specify all of the different parameters that we want this user to have. And then if we can't find it, we're actually going to synthetically create it. So this ensures that the user will always have the data they need, regardless of whether it exists or not. And then it's still going to allocate that data so it doesn't get consumed by another user. So those are a few examples of how you can chain different activities together, and all of these pipelines can be called via an API call as well. So you can even put this inside of something like a CI/CD pipeline. But really together, all of these demonstrate how the act stage can transform your data delivery. So rather than having it be a slow manual process, we can make it fast, intelligent, and customized, and also automate that process to keep development moving forward.
Lina, could you zoom in on your pipeline model, please?
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
More insight, deeper look.
Yeah, no problem. And really the pipeline, you can think of it as an RPA tool. So you'll notice here that we have our, if I just zoom in quite a bit, we have our activities as well as other standard actions, such as logging a message or creating if-else sections of logic. So really your imagination is the limit in terms of what you can do inside of a pipeline here. Well, all right, apologies if it was a little bit zoomed out there. We will move on to our last stage then, which is monitoring, excuse me, so we can close the loop there. So essentially with monitoring, we're returning back to discovery, but this time we're going to monitor for changes. So this allows us to be proactive with our test data and anticipate what kind of requests will likely come and picking up on changes as they happen. So we're preventing those bottlenecks where test data isn't available or there was a change that was unexpected. So monitoring essentially boils down to constantly running those data insights we have. So watching for schema changes, auto updating that definition from earlier, and also notifying stakeholders of new data risks. So returning to the dashboard we had up earlier, thanks to our automated scanning tasks, we're getting up to the date intelligence about our data environment. So I actually really recently made a scan or a change to the database and then performed a scan today. So I removed quite a few tables that we no longer needed. And we could see here in our version history that the latest version, which I triggered today, we have the 12 tables removed. And we also have our data section here. So if there was any unclassified data, we can go ahead and click on mask to quickly take us to a masking activity. And there weren't any new business changes, but those would be reported up here as well. And once again, we ran that data validation and all of our data is still valid. So we do have the email results summary triggered as part of our scan. So I immediately received an email which summarizes all of the changes for Acme Bank. So here we have exactly which 12 tables I removed. And if there was any new sensitive data, I would receive it as part of here as well. And there's a link to the full report in the dashboard, which anyone who has access to the platform can view. So with that, we'll just summarize everything that we covered today. So enterprise test data is meant to be a comprehensive solution that transforms the way that you manage and deliver data across your organization. So it's really built to solve real world challenges and streamline every stage of the test data lifecycle. So in the discover stage, we gained some visibility into our data landscape, automatically scanning, classifying, and mapping our data so you always know what you have and where it lives. And then in the act stage, we moved from insight to impact. So whether it's creating a clean development environment or generating synthetic data or automatically provisioning data for our users, you're always giving your teams exactly what they need. And lastly, at our monitoring stage, we're closing the loop with our continuous scanning, live dashboards, as well as proactive alerts. So with all of this, you're no longer reacting to change, you're anticipating it. And you're keeping everyone aligned in the process, ensuring compliance and having a real-time view of your data environment. So with that, that is the demo that we wanted to go through today. So Mantis, if it's all right, and I can pass back over to you for the slides.
Actually, let me, can I pick it up a little bit? Because I just wanted to, there's just a couple of other little things that I was thinking about as you, select windows, select entire screen. There we go. Allow ding dong dang. We get our lovely one there. Okay. So I'm just going. There's a few just further based on the poll. Actually, I just want to highlight one or two other things as well. Now, one of the big issues I'd probably say is integration testing, or kind of I like to use the concept of plugs. You've got to think of every application as has its got its own sets of plugs, and you're trying to make sure that your data plugs into those. So you're basically testing the integration of 2 systems, possibly 3 systems together. Now, inside the tool, we also have this ability to kind of federate the understanding of data. So here we have all of our different connections into, now these could be just regular databases, they could be into ERP systems, or they could actually be, we've scanned some messages and basically build up what we call a micro DB of messages. Now, what we've got in here is you can basically go and build cross technology queries. Now, why do you want to do this? First of all, it's very difficult for users to be able to do this by hand, or even if you ask your DBAs, that's kind of built into the product. This allows you to join together common keys, which are being passed in and out as the system as you're moving along through your integration. Now, it's quite interesting from an analytical point of view to see, you can kind of scan this and look for gaps in data, etc. But more usefully for developers and testers, I need to pick up, if I'm choosing this particular account ID from my bank system, then my payment system has a different account number. So I've got to make sure that that account number matches. I also want to make sure that I'm picking something with a savings account rather than a checking account as well. And I also need to make sure that they have a positive balance, etc. So this idea of being able to federate your data, once you get everything put into our ETD platform, then basically this allows you to think about being able to create these federated queries, which then allow you to find your data in a much smarter and more resilient way, because what tends to happen is your tests run and then something changes slightly and then they stop falling over again. The other one is we also have a very strong, if you have a moment, I would have a quick look at we have full support in for, and we're a major technology partner of Windocs. Windocs allows you to create virtual databases. Now, virtual databases are very useful for certain parts of testing. You might want to give every developer their own database. You might want to create databases which you can roll forward and backwards during automation runs, so you can run it, find if you've got any problems, fix them, roll it back and go forward. And basically we have inside our pipeline the ability to create basically from scratch any database and can turn it into a virtual database, and you can have 10, 20, 30 of them, doesn't really matter, and you can stop them and start them at will as well. So I think that's one thing which is becoming, I would say, virtually nearly all of our customers are very interested in this at the moment. I'm also just going to quickly talk about where do you start. I suppose one of the problems that people have is this all sounds magical and wonderful, and you may well be kind of partway on this journey already. But how do you actually get it in? How do you get it installed? How do you actually crack on and get starting? And I think this discover, act, monitor type concept is actually is pretty good, and it's a good coat rack to hang your hats on, basically. So the reality is, once you've installed the software inside your firewalls, we can basically start the process of scanning, sending out those emails, and scan it, looking for the scanning that we were showing was initially for kind of PI data, but you can also kind of do much deeper scanning where we're looking for multivariate analysis, where we're spotting patterns of relationships between data types, minimums, maximums, standard deviations, all those types of things as well, and also discovering these soft keys within your relationships. And we've got lots of hunters that go off and do that for you. So again, paying off a lot of technical debt. The next thing then is to start spinning up these kind of small projects. I'm kind of a big believer that you should be able to get a test data project inside a sprint, and you pick off usually the teams that are kind of struggling the most getting data, or you might have a sort of a kind of beacon team that always like playing with new technology, and go with them and say, well, let's try and get some find and make data working. So we're going to actually put in some data allocation, etc. So it doesn't need to be kind of earth shattering. You can basically kind of sashay gently into this. Over time, you need to then say, well, we need a kind of center of excellence or center of best practices, and you start imposing kind of rules of engagement whenever your customers come to you and say, well, I need data. And the answer to that is absolutely not. You basically say, I need data. Here's my requirements documents. Here's my access to my databases. Here's all my ports being opened. And please come to my next sprint meeting, so you can listen into what they're actually wanting. So that's it. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and go back to the slides again. So stop sharing and go to content and share, start presentation, and we should now be down into some of the final things here. So if we look at, the discover, the act, and the monitoring, I mean, the thing with acting is that we're very, very kind of agnostic in terms of what it takes to get a job done. We have synthetic data is one way of doing it. We can push data into backend databases. We can clone data, which I find particularly useful because you can clone complex bugs, which people spend hours and hours trying to recreate in lower environments. Just pull out the entire chain and put it into a dedicated environment with a whole set of keys, have 20 or 30 of them, and fix it. We've obviously got our masking, our subset, our virtualization, and we kind of showed you around some of our pipeline stuff, which is basically, think of it as kind of a UiPath RPA tool. It's the same kind of technology stack, but it's very much focused on test data and DevOps. We've got lots of gap analysis as well when you're looking to kind of analyze, how good is my data? And the reality is that people get very hung up on production data, whereas actually you've got to think of production data as one set of use cases. What you're really looking for in your development and your QA environments is to have much, much richer combinations so you find those bugs earlier. And I've got a million more stories on that about people who said, just use production, it'll be fine. Bingo, a payment system didn't go in, it was 6 months late, that types of things. The other thing is that, we also have some very strong quality modeler product, which is incorporated into the test data platform, and that allows you to create lots of automation scripts. So if you needed to think about, well, actually for this particular system, I don't have access to the back ends or the APIs, so I'm just going to go through the front end. We will basically just help you build a set of automation scripts to just push that data in. But that data comes in with all of the right parameters that you need for your test case. The actual user would just use the same portal that Lina was showing you, and that just pushes it in. Basically, we don't care. Just get the job done as quickly as possible, democratize it, track it, and you're bringing, pay off as much technical debt as you can. So all of these types of things are kind of the key thing with, I guess, with the act. And let's have a look for some ROI. Has that come up? You're getting enterprise ROI. It's not coming up on my screen. Number 14.
I'll pop it up for you. All right.
Yeah, great.
There you go.
There we go. I think. I'm sorry to be slightly mean to marketing. Marketing loves a number to put in. How much ROI. And people, I think, sort of fairly reasonably are fairly skeptical in terms of you're going to get that ROI. But if you think about it, test data is always the second most thing that's on the top of people's lists to improve their development lifecycle. The top one does flutter around. It could be environment, it could be automation, and they're very sort of fashion led. But test data is pretty much always number 2 on the list. So this ability to have richer, faster, higher quality, better coverage, nimbler, virtual data is now really straightforward to do. In terms of the ROI, you can spend, if you look at a developer, they're probably spending 5 to 10% of their time trying to create a scenario, and they would do that kind of by hand or hacking data, which is why your development environments tend to have a lot of bad data in, because they fiddle around with it, which is fair enough. So that would be a developer, but sometimes a tester can probably spend maybe a week setting up a set of scenarios. You might have someone who says, right, we want to launch this, but we need to create a training environment. Oh, how do we do that? How do you create a very small training environment? They could spend weeks and weeks doing that. So the amount of time that people actually do, and it's never really tracked as an individual item, I would say up to 50% of can be spent doing that. The other one is, if you've got richer data, you tend to find bugs way earlier, and the cost of that is exponential in terms of when you get these very large numbers of 3 million or so, 3.38 million, those tend to be because they found a lot of bugs earlier in the system, and those drop down dramatically, and the cost of those bugs then gets rolled up into these somewhat dramatic ROIs. I would say a good rule of thumb is that if you have 6 sprints and you've got a good test data strategy, you should get it down to 5 sprints. If you're getting bugs late in the development lifecycle or in production, you should probably look at changing that to to finding closer to 95% of the bugs in Dev 1 and QA 1, basically. So I think those are kind of more realistic kind of ROI types of figures that you can kind of come up with when you're trying to persuade your CFO to part with a few dollars to kind of set this up or restructure it. Just one final thing is, just to kind of wrap it up, is centralized or not centralized? They come, they go. People, some love a central team, some just like, you know, all the budgets are spread out amongst the teams, and then you've got to think about each project as paying for it, and then you've got a tool in the middle which costs some money. So that, you know, but I would say that it can be a very small team, and that team can just basically be kind of a sort of guardian of best practice. And I think putting these jobs inside the one framework is probably the #1 thing you can do to start with, because it sort of democratizes things as well and brings people together and getting an understanding. And then once you get moving with one team and you get a little bit of success, then other teams start to want it, and then your budgets are much easier to kind of unlock to try and move towards this kind of proactive sort of shift left AI driven approach to test data. Okay, Matters.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Huw, and yeah, thank you, Lina, as well. So I think we'll move on to the Q&A section. I do have some questions here for you, Huw and Lina, but this one's for you, Huw. The question is, it's to do. Let me just quickly find it because I believe it got lost in the chat. Cool. So I would, love for you, Huw, to talk about, or how you can use our platform to potentially anticipate your test data needs, if that is something that we can help with.
Yeah, I think what you've got to think about with that is it's actually as simple. It's basically it's kind of a lot easier than people think. So once you create anything you're already doing and you create one of those forms, you'll have a set of parameters on it. Those parameters are actually the things that the business care about. And if you go back to a requirement document, you'll say the credit balance is greater than 0. That's actually a business thing that actually basically switches you left to right. So in your kind of flow diagram. So this ability to kind of spend time kind of understanding. Sorry, just repeat the question to make sure I get it right here.
The question is, how can you use data or our platform to anticipate?
Oh yeah. So once you've done that, that's really good. But actually, a better place to go actually is to sit in a sprint meeting and just make notes, and also look at requirements documents. If you look at requirements documents, people. There's a great Dutch company which basically allowed you to put context in the requirements. So if you have anything which is a static data term, like a credit reference, you can actually put that and underline it. And that then, if you look through a requirements document and you say, well, we're obviously going to have to test these, but which things are we testing? Because there's verbs and there's all these actions going on which are more to do with the transform. But once you understand the data states, actually pulling them out and creating variations of them, chances are you would probably get 80 to 90% of them with your first cut by just looking at your existing test cases, having a quick browse through your requirements, and managing your test data requests. I think those three things actually get you there. And then what will happen then is someone said, oh, whoa, hold on. For our Japanese market, we actually have 2 different types of codes. We have the standard credit check codes, but they have a further set of credit check codes. Could you incorporate those in the form? And you say, sure. So you go find out where they come from. You set a little form, say only do for the Japanese market. When they see their form, they've got another ability to go and then find the data or make the data like so. So it's relatively systematic. I would say kind of rule of thumb is you knock out the first 80% probably in the first week, 2 weeks, and then the other ones some will take longer than others because they're actually quite complicated business terms which might have a lot of stuff going on, different positions and all those types of things. And then you just take a value, how much value are we going to get out of doing this work? It's just one user for a one-time use case. Yeah, they can do it themselves. But if it's something that everyone else is going to be using, then absolutely you just put it into the sausage machine.
Perfect. Thank you, Huw. So I have a question here for Lina. The question is, with everything you showed in your demo, how quickly can you get to that stage, right? From discovery to acting on the data you have to then, utilizing those monitoring dashboards?
Sure, yeah. So with the discovery phase, it's really as simple as just getting all of the credentials for your databases or all of the files that you want to eventually generate or manipulate data for, bringing them all in. So it's just a simple wizard to go through that. As part of that wizard, you automatically trigger the scan. So everything I showed as part of that discovery phase is automated. You have the option to set up all of those different data tasks right at the beginning. So that would be less than a day's work to do. And then for the act stage, we can set up, depending on your requirements, we'll just work through iterations of the activity. That's also relatively easy to set up. And any existing activity you have, we can also chain it as part of the pipeline. And the monitoring phase is completely inbuilt. So I would say the turnaround time is really fast. You can essentially automate most of it and spend most of your time doing the act phase and getting that form exactly like how you would need it and actually delivering it to your teams.
Perfect. Thank you, Lina. And then I got a question here for you, Huw, someone who's been in the industry for 100 years, the godfather of test data. The question is, what sets Curiosity and our ETD platform apart from others in the market?
I think what we're trying to do here is to actually, I guess, there's lots of tools that have features. I mean, whenever I, read one of the, Gartner reports, there's a zillion features out there. I think we have a kind of coherent strategy, which is, where a lot of us are, when I started as a developer, I'm still developing, are very much baked into how people work and how they really work, So I think we've got tons of experience in that. What we've tried to do with the product is to try and answer a lot of those types of things that people actually do day to day, and if you add up all these little individual features and you go and buy 4 tools and you add them together, that's probably about 6 times the price of our one tool. So what we're trying to do is to basically try and say, well, it's a bit of a one-stop shop. You might start with 2 or 3 features, but why would you then, have to buy another tool to do that? So, we're trying to make the licensing kind of fairly flexible for people to kind of grow into that. The other one is the corporate dictionary. No one really does a corporate dictionary. No one does AI mining. And I think that is probably the most fundamental thing that companies, I mean, it's a bit like if you walked into a housing estate, and there are, I don't know, let's say 500 homes in there, and they're all there, and you think fantastic, and you walk up and down, you say, right, that's green, that's red, that's got gables, that's got this, and then you say, right, can I have a look at the plans of those? Can I have a look at the plumbing? Can I have a look at the electricity? Can I have a look at where the sewage comes in and out? Nah. In no other walk of business apart from IT would that happen. So, I think it's stunning that we've got to this state of the world where people don't have corporate dictionaries. They've created little fiefdoms where they all work on their own. They don't really care about anywhere else. But if you're a CIO and you're trying to actually, I mean, that's why AI is going to be very hard for these big companies, because they don't really have that map of how data flows around between all these things. They also don't understand the transforms. They don't understand what these things mean. They don't understand the historical data. So I think this idea of the metadata dictionary is absolutely massive. If you put that in with Quality Modeler, by the way, thanks for teaming me up for a proper rant here with that question. It actually allows you to build the variations and also builds in the data flows inside the tool. So, people will have the other tools already. We were out in Holland the other day, and they do already have an internal tool which has lots of things about business flows and things, which was great. And they've actually spent time building it, and it's extremely useful to the organization. What they don't have is the data. So join those two together, fantastic. And I think that really is kind of what we're about. There's this kind of 3 parts for question. Lots of functions that you can go into. The sort of understanding of how people operate, and then this kind of master concept of the dictionary, I think, is kind of fundamental to where we're going with it. And the other thing is very plug and play. There's so much new technology coming out all the time, and for us, we just grab it, we put it in, we create a new type of test data activity. It can be inside the tool inside 2 weeks. We might come up with a new release, bingo, it's in the tool.
Perfect. Thank you, Huw. So I think we're coming up to the end of the webinar. So, if you'd like to carry on the conversation, there are a number of ways you can get in touch with Lina and Huw. If you'd like to learn more, please get in touch with them, via LinkedIn or email. We're always super keen to talk more about test data. So feel free to reach out, organize a call. We're happy to do that. Additionally, please follow Curiosity on LinkedIn or visit our website to stay up to date with our latest updates on, new content, upcoming webinars, and, speaking of upcoming webinars, the great Lina will be featured in an upcoming webinar on the 4th of June with Harry Byrne, who's part of our solutions team. So this webinar, using AI-driven test data to avoid software failures, will be a follow-up to this webinar. And you'll see, how our AI features can enhance, data modeling, coverage, and compliance, and hopefully help you unlock, efficiency and avoid critical software failures. So, visit our website to sign up for that one. But I think all that remains to be said is a huge thank you for everyone for joining, and a massive thank you to Huw and Lina for presenting.
Yeah, thanks everyone. For all those people asked those questions. Actually, if you want to just book in a chat, love to chat. Always keen to have a sort of a rant with a fellow test data. So yeah, honestly, we're really serious. So just book in half an hour. We can either point you in the right direction or come up with some advice, or whatever it takes. So thanks so much, everyone. Great, thanks, Lina. Exactly. That was brilliant. First time I've seen that demo. Excellent.
Thank you so much, everyone.